Strange TV. I'm JD Strange, and we're in the Strange Bunker in downtown Bangkok. We made it. A brand new year, a brand new fear. We're back in the COVID saddle for 2022. I'm joined today with Matt Rickard from up in the north of Thailand. He's from originally from England, but he resides in Pai, which is not a million miles away from Chiang Mai. And as you can see by his slightly slightly homoerotic sweater, it's rather cold, colder than it is down here. Hello, Matt. How are you today?
I'm very well, mate. Yeah, good to see you. It's not English winter, but it's northern Thailand winter, which is, I think, the most pleasant weather in the world, really. That's why I moved here. It's lovely this time of year. 3 months of sunny 28-degree days, and then kind of 12, 15 at night. So it's lovely, good sleeping weather. So, but it's certainly not UK weather, that's for sure.
Well, I miss the proper winters. That's like one of the things the seasons and the proper winters. When you know it's really cold, I guess that because then you know you have something to head towards, spring and then summer. But yeah, we have like 5 or 6 days of like the kind of weather you have in Bangkok, where it's like tolerable. We had a power cut recently, and I had to get a hotel because it's just it's unbearable to try and sleep when it's this hot. So
yeah, right. Well, I moved here I was in Singapore before for 8 years, and I used to come here on holiday. So that's going back to moved here in 2014. But Singapore just has like one season. It's just hot and sweaty. And the weird thing is it plays, firstly, I missed the winter. So I used to come up here because it was nice to have seasons. But it also mucks up your memory. It's really strange because you realize when you think back on what did you do last year, the year before, you mark it in your head based on winter, summer, spring, autumn. That's for UK, obviously. But Singapore, you go, oh, what did I do last year? And you're trying to remember, and you cannot mark the time because there's no seasonal, defined seasonal change. So yeah. And I like the seasons. I like a bit of cold, and that's why I used to come here from Singapore, and hence why I moved here, really.
It's the part of the brain which is the exploratory part of the brain. I'm going to pronounce it wrong. I want to say hippocampus, but that part of the brain is used to explore different places and different sensations, and it helps with our memory. That's why people who move around a lot often have better memories because they're experiencing different things, and they can locate different times, different places. And I think it's the same with the seasons. It's like you can remember, what did I do in the summer of 1993 in England, because the summer was just different.
Yeah.
Winter, but Singapore.
That was a good summer, by the way, 93.
I
do remember the 93 summer. 93 was a good year. The early 90s were great years in the UK.
Well, it was before all that mobile telephone nonsense, and people were, communicating a lot more in real time. 93 would have been the summer of music, really. And
I went to Glastonbury. I did Glastonbury in 91 and 93. I think I saw the Prodigy in 93 at Glastonbury. I left in 96. But yeah, I'm pretty sure the Prodigy I saw at Glastonbury in 93. But yeah, it was. Yeah, I don't want to show my age, but the music of that era in the UK particularly was awesome, as you well know, right? The kind of late end of the 80s, 89, 90 through to about 96 was just such a great time for great music out of the UK.
Yeah, I was at Reading in 93, I think, actually, which shows my age as well, but I was only about 14 years old or something.
Come on, you aren't. You're not that much younger than me, are you?
I had like a family ticket or something, yeah. But no, it was, and a lot of, I left the UK around just about after 2000, like 2001. And I think a lot of other people did as well. I think Alex Garland's the Beach novel came out in paperback in '93 or '94, and then the film came out. And I do wonder if that had something to do with like this mass migration of dissatisfied, dissatisfied. What's the word? People who were chasing the capitalist dream. I forget the term, but there was a lot of that going on, wasn't there? A lot of people dropping out. It's almost like 60s again, and coming to the east, coming to India, and coming to Southeast. Or was it? You went to Australia first, right?
Yeah, I did. I left. So I left October, I think September, October '96, and I did. I was working in a factory in Milton Keynes doing night shifts. Not the best job in the world, not the funnest job in the world. And I just had enough. And I'd already been traveling to India, so I'd done like a 4-month trip to India a couple of years before. And then with my girlfriend at the time, we just decided, hey, let's go. And we bought single tickets. So we got a ticket that went UK, India, Thailand, Sydney, and then got the working visa on the other end and just went without any real plan and assuming I would come back. But yeah, after we did 3 months in India, ran out of money, did about 3 days in Thailand because we just were completely out of cash, landed in Sydney, had met someone in India, got a job. That was it. Never came. I did 10 years there. So yeah, it was, which I think was part of the dream. It was like, you know, like a lot of that whole, I think it was also the traveling thing. People just suddenly like, oh, we can just travel and go and work in other countries. That whole Australian working visa thing, which, you know, my brothers have done as well, was a real handy way just to kind of run away and find yourself. And it was an awesome time. Goa in '96. So yeah, I left it. So I was there New Year '96. I was in Goa, which I remember fondly. It was, you know, the time of kind of before all the big hotels and parties on the beach, and really fun. It was great, and didn't come back. So
with the risk of sounding like old farts, it was a lot more adventurous back then, I think, to up sticks and move to the other side of the world. You know, there was less communication, there was less, no social media. You weren't checking in with people to tell how you were every day. You know, it's kind of like you really left home. You know,
mate, this is to that point. I remember, so I met a good mate of mine, Chris Brown. I mean, I didn't know him. I met him on the beach in India. He was instrumental in helping me get a job, and we've been mates ever since. But I met him in India. We were a bunch of us traveling, and he left to go to Australia, and I was leaving a couple of months later with my girlfriend. He said, "Oh, give me your address." I gave him my address, right? It's because there's no mobile phones. And then when I landed, I can't remember if it was in Thailand just before I got there or Sydney. I phoned my mum. She said, "Oh, there's a letter here for you. Do you want me to open it?" My mum opened it, and it was from Chris. It said, "Hey, tell Matty when he's coming to Australia, ring this number. We got a room for him." But, you know, like there was no, beyond him writing that letter to my mum, because I gave him the address, I never would have heard from the guy again, and called him, ended up, you know, living in this house with 12 backpackers in a 3-bedroom house, but all because of a letter he wrote to my mum. And there was no, it's weird because you're so used to it now. And I think as a kid growing up now, you're totally embedded in it. But even with us, we are. And I just can't imagine having to have those lines of communication to get in touch with someone again, you know, writing a physical letter, putting it in the post. I phone my mum, you know, she tells me, I call him, and yeah, it's very different now, hey?
Yeah, better in some ways, but not so good in others. I think it's less adventurous. You don't have to work as hard in many ways. So from I mean, what we're getting to for the strange listeners is Matt is the writer and producer of the film project Dark Karma, which we collaborated on a few years ago and are still working on now. Richie Moore, the director, is waiting to hop on the line as well. He's involved with the shoot at the moment, but he's hopefully going to join us, and we're going to talk about Dark Karma. So the interesting thing for me was you went from Australia to Sydney, right?
Sydney to Singapore.
Sorry, Sydney to Singapore. And this was, you had a job waiting for you in Singapore. You weren't chancing it. You had a position lined up there. And how long did you work in the Lion City for?
So I was there from I went there 2005. So I was Australia 96 to 2005. And then, yeah, my career took me to Singapore 2005, and I was there till 2014. But so I went up there for a job. I was very much the kind of, the in the expat mold of working for a big American company, and went up there and worked in sales. And yeah, I loved the place for the first few years. It's a great place, Singapore. I don't know if you've been, but we went together, didn't we? Of course. It's a great place if you're in in the expat kind of job lifestyle, I think. But when I got out of that, and then I was contracting, it's a tough country when you're kind of going on your own on things. Definitely, it's a different ball game altogether. But yeah, I was there 2005 till 2014. So what's that? Nine years.
And this is where Dark Karma, the seeds to Dark Karma were sown and began to bud. I think 2014. You took a screenwriting course, I think.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was. Man, when was it? It was. I can tell you exactly how it all started. Actually, I don't exactly remember what year, but it was around 2012, and I went for. It was around. I was in. So the last 2 years I was in Singapore. I was contracting, and I was working. So I was part-time working. I was doing writing. I've always loved, but it's never been a profession. It's been a hobby. And I was at Christmas Day at a friend's house, and they played a bingo over, after lunch, Christmas drinks. We had a game of bingo. And then I went back to my, at the time, ex-wife's house afterwards, and she lived in a housing commission. So Singapore has these HDBs, Housing Development Board, kind of like the council estates in the UK without all the violence. It's without any, they're like real safe kind of council areas, but it's quite different to UK council housing, but it kind of looks the same. And I was sitting there, and they have these areas under HDBs called the void deck, which is, it's basically an area under a building. So they've got the stilts, and then you've got the building above. And we were opposite the void deck, and I was looking at it, and all the old kind of uncles play mahjong. I don't know if you know mahjong. It's kind of like a gambling,
a game of chance.
Yeah, I don't even know much about it, but they were playing mahjong, and I was watching them, and we'd just been playing bingo, and I had this kind of wacky idea for a story. And I'm also then at that point an expat that had kind of gone out of work, and I had this idea for a story that ended up being called Void Deck Bingo, which was, hey, it was kind of what I was experiencing. I'm like, I'm an expat out of work, and I end up I actually was deciding, do I do it or is it a story? I was like, maybe I can start a bingo game on the void deck with all the locals, and then it became, what if a kind of gangster element came in, and yeah, to answer the question you asked, I ended up I didn't know how to write a screenplay at all. I went back and I went to and did a course, a kind of 6-month, 1 day a week course, and learned to kind of structure a screenplay. And that was the beginning of the seed of the idea. And then moving to Thailand 2 years later, the whole kind of story kind of twisted into what it is now. Which the essence is all still there, but it's completely different. The Dark Karma from the kind of Void Deck Bingo original kind of idea is very different. However, it was the seed, and it was where it started. So
at this point, you had bingo rather than cards, because the film as it stands now is all about a card game, and a guy called Tim, who is a high-flying executive. Well, he started out as an executive, then we made him one of these boiler room guys. But no matter what, he's making a lot of money in the city. It started out in Singapore, now it's Bangkok. But originally in the city of Singapore, he was a guy down on his luck, living in the void, who started the bingo game, or was the whole white-collar kind of character fully developed then?
It was very similar. So he was a guy that had lost his job, kicked out of work, and he didn't want to leave Singapore. And so he was an expat, kind of kicked out of his banking job, not for the same reasons we have now, but the reasons didn't matter. He was kind of down and out, needed an opportunity, and he bit of a chancer, and he decided, hey, he'll start a bingo game on a void deck opposite his girlfriend's HDB apartment. Then the local kind of gangster unit see what he's doing, and he's making money, and they start kind of knocking on the door and saying, right, we need a cut of this, and you've got to make it bigger. And so there's quite a lot of parallels. And I got from a production point of view, I mean, I got to the point of actually sitting with, I interviewed a local Singapore gangster, and he'd just come out of jail, and asked them all about the kind of, you don't see Singapore as having a kind of gangster scene, but like anywhere in the world, there is always an underworld, right? So I kind of started researching that area. So there's huge parallels, but the story itself was so kind of immature at that point, and my ability with it was I was just scratching the surface. So I think as a product, it was so far from what it is now, but it parallels quite a bit in terms of characters and ideas and stuff.
You say Singapore didn't have a criminal element, but it once did, right? It once was a very villainous city. I know when I was researching the one of the films I was writing, there was a big criminal element there in the 1950s. A lot of gangs, a lot of mafia style.
Yeah.
And I wonder if they just mutated or transferred to like white collar kind of business.
Damn, you know what? You're asking me a question that I kind of know the answer to, and I can't remember because I researched this, and I remember looking into it because there was a whole kind of big family unit around this back at that time, and I forget the name, but it did have, and I think a lot of it, Hong Kong, of course, is a lot more famous for this with the triads and everything, but Singapore had that same element, and I don't want to try and share something I can't remember because I just can't remember the depth of it. But when I was researching, I do remember, before it was all there. But of course, Lee Kuan Yew as a kind of a governor of the city-state. I mean, his mission and what he did to kind of clean up that country in the many ways he did, and integrate it with different cultures and look after the kind of local population. You kind of look at it as there's no real kind of survival element for a kind of modern gangster in Singapore. I mean, who knows? Gangsters these days are probably in the banking system and online, right? So it's all very different, but certainly from your kind of traditional lock, stock movie style kind of scene, Singapore was not that for a long time, I think.
Which leads me nicely onto the next question, being was the switch of location from Singapore to Bangkok, did it have that in mind? The fact that there is more visible crime in Bangkok as compared to Singapore, or was it just was it visually more exciting as a location, or was it the fact that you moved there?
I think it was all of those things, actually. I can remember the decision. I remember sitting there because Don Linder, who I got to the point where I was like, hey, I want to make this movie, but I need to bring more expertise in. And at the time, I ended up commissioning Don Linder, who's a New York writer living in Chiang Mai. And it was almost at that point, because I looked at the script and I'm like, okay, I've got a script here that's about, a guy in Singapore. I'm about to sit down with, someone who's written screenplays already. He's American. He's living in Thailand. I'm living in Thailand. And I just looked at it and went, you know what? I sat with him and said, let's change this to a story that is relevant here. And it came from that. And then him and I kind of brainstormed the whole kind of idea of how would you take this and map it to the color of Bangkok, the characters in Bangkok, and just, kind of pivot it to a new story. And that's where it kind of happened. It was logical. He didn't even know much about Singapore. I was like, what are we going to do? If I'm going to work with another writer who's been here 20 years, it was half creative and half just purely logical of
practical.
Yeah, practical. Yeah.
We should mention Don, who some of our listeners might know as being the writer of The Last Executioner, which won an award, I think, here, the first foreign writer to win.
Yeah, it did. And in China as well.
And in China, and also Decade recently. So you were in good hands with Don, with the rewrite. and the location switch was just a logical, practical, pragmatic solution to the rewrite. Were there any other fundamental changes during this like first big reconstruction of the concept of Dark Karma?
Oh, that's a good question, because I hadn't thought about it, but as soon as you said it, I remember there was, because from a character and kind of setting point of view, obviously the obvious things like it's gone from a bingo game to a card game, but that stuff's all kind of makes sense. But one of the things that was there that isn't now is there was a whole romantic angle in the original screenplay, and that was part of the character arc of, and I don't remember the name, whether he was called Tim in the original screenplay, but there was a whole kind of romance arc to what he was doing, and it was all related to a local, and that was his motivation for wanting to stay in the country, right? So whereas we do not have that now in the current screenplay, it's much more about the raw kind of, crime, bit of dark comedy, bit of kind of craziness of his life without worrying too much about any romantic element to anything that's going on. So that's pretty much it. Everything else just transferred into a completely different story with the same themes. But yeah, the kind of romantic interest, there is still that a little bit, right?
There's a little one,
but it's different.
Romantic thing, but it's Bangkok romance.
Yeah,
it's a kind of romance that lies to you, that chews you up and spits you out, and makes you a bigger man than you were before. It's a life learning romance, I think, in the current version.
Yes, which is very different.
It's not his motivation.
Yeah,
his motivation is not to save the girl in the current version. But no, that's cool, and it really is. I can see what you did with the kind of Lock, Stock, which brings us back to like 93, 94. When was Lock, Stock released?
I think
it was around that time, right?
It must have been around 93. I'd guess 93, actually. Funny we were talking about 93. I remember the budget. It's funny, I don't remember the year. 800k pounds is what Guy Ritchie spent on it. Less than I think it was 800,000 pounds. Did a really good job using quite a few. Sting was in it, right? He pulled, because he was doing music videos before, right? So it was his first movie, so he kind of pulled all the favors from the kind of network he had. But it must have been around 93, roughly, at a guess. I don't know. I don't think it was earlier. It must have been. It was before 96, because I left the UK in 96. But yeah, I mean, awesome movie.
Snatch. I remember talking to someone about Snatch in Thailand in 2001.
Yeah, that was it. That maybe it's later then. Maybe Lock, Stock was later.
97, 98, something like that. I don't know, but it's definitely a 90s movie, and it definitely has all that spirit. It's not a noughties movie, that's for sure.
No, definitely not.
It's totally 90s. And again, there's no love interest in that at all. It's a total gangster romp. And I remember you comparing it to EastEnders as well during one of our conversations.
Did I?
Yeah.
I probably did.
Well, Only Fools and Horses. It's one of the two. It's one of those London.
Oh, the opening scene is very Only Fools and Horses, because that opening scene is them. It's almost Del Boy and Rodney. Yeah, like that is very. But it's funny you say EastEnders, because it makes me think of the fact that in sorry, what was it? Snatch, the follow up, you had Frank Butcher. I forget his acting name.
He's a Jewish gem dealer, isn't he?
Yeah, well, he was a stand-up comedian, right? And then he was in EastEnders, and then he did a brilliant job in Snatch. He was awesome, but he's obviously from a British point of view very known for EastEnders. So, but I love those movies. I think Guy Ritchie's had a interesting career, right, all over the place, kind of thing. But frankly, the only stuff he really does well is those types of movies. When he, The Gentleman, which I only saw recently, that was so much better than his King Arthur film, which cost about 20 times as much. He does that kind of British gangster stuff very well.
Yeah, and he wasn't from that world either, was he? I think he was. I think he was from a more middle class upbringing.
Yeah, I don't know. He's married. I think so. Probably he married Madonna, didn't he? that's that's that would have been a mad part of his life.
That's a very middle class thing to do.
Yeah, indeed.
Harry Madonna. So when you were rewriting the script with Don, much of what we have now was in place. We have the person, the place, the problem. Tim, executive, loses a bunch of money at cards. He needs to find the money to pay back JD, who is the like crime mafia. What would we call her? Godmother. She's not that old, but she's got her fingers in a lot.
Godmother, I like that.
Godmother. A finger in a lot of pies in crime in Bangkok, but she's actually Chinese. But she wants one thing in particular. She wants this this sacred Buddha bowl, which is said to have like curative powers. She's ill. She thinks that this bowl will restore her health. Tim owes her a lot of money, and she says, "We don't know if the game's rigged, like lock, stock, or we think it probably is. Watch the movie and find out." But she says, "Go and get that fucking bowl. I need that bowl. Get the bowl, and you repay me." But she's not the only person looking for the bowl, right? We had in the version 2 of the script we've done, we had the Russian mafia.
Ukrainian. I think we went Russian. Or, yeah.
So this bowl is the holy grail. Now, where did you first hear about the bowl?
When you made it up, mate.
Bowl in the beginning. No, it was an emerald Buddha head. Wasn't it?
Was a Buddha. Yeah.
And we decided that wouldn't be particularly sensitive with the film board.
Well, when we filmed the teaser, I remember actually when Tom Waller went to the film board, because we started to do it with when we did the investors teaser, which was like a 5-day shoot. We'd called it an Emerald Buddha, I think, which was completely non-intentional of understanding what an Emerald Buddha is. I think there is such thing as, and they were somewhat sensitive about that being used as an artifact in the thing. But however, when he pressed, they just, for the reason, they didn't give a reason, and then they just let it go ahead. But I think we made the decision of, I'm pretty sure you and I think made the decision of why make it difficult when it doesn't need to be. And actually, the kind of the bowl represents the same type of kind of object within the movie. But yeah, what was your question? When did the Buddha first come into it? Right? Is that what that was?
So you answered the question. It was it wasn't the bowl first of all. It was the bowl came later when we sat
and
it. Right. Okay. So
yeah.
And it does. I think it probably does more than the Buddha head. It's like the Ark of the Covenant in Indiana Jones, the first episode.
Well, the Buddha originally was just something that had value. The bowl now in the script is something that has way more than just value, right?
Oh, it's priceless. Yeah.
It has qualities. Kind of mystical elements to it, and it's way more interesting, so yeah.
Okay, I was just checking on Richie to see where he is. Yeah, I think that it's more interesting that it has these supernatural properties which can be used for good.
Exactly.
So depending on who gets their hands on it, the course of the world could be in jeopardy. So what we do is we've taken a localized domestic personal problem and raised it into like an international potential catastrophe, with the bowl getting into the wrong hands of these characters. But I think JD, I think she would just use it for herself, right? I don't think the world's in danger with JD getting her hands on it, but we have these other characters who are definitely hell-bent on world domination and destruction, which makes the movie, in my opinion, a internationally internationally kind of interesting is the wrong word, but yeah, it's a bigger concept now.
Yeah, it's a bigger concept, and the thing I love that you guys have done with it is it was very much about Tim, the central character before. Now and again, I talk about Lock, Stock because I love the way there's no central character in Lock, Stock. There's however many, 8 characters. And I think what you guys have done, Tim is still very much the antagonist, but he's less and less. I think, Jai is as big a character, and yeah, there's much more. It's like a base of interesting characters. And personally, like what's the film called? The Counselor. I think of that film. I love films where, okay, someone's kind of the lead, but where you've got this base of, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 really colorful, interesting characters I enjoy those films. And you guys have done a really cool job of turning kind of the new script into that. And yes, we got Tim, but we got all these other people around him. And it's not just about the antagonist, it's really is a mixture of really colorful, interesting characters,
Multiple POVs. So I think, the protagonist is definitely Tim, but it's also Jai D. She's an antagonist, but a protagonist.
Sorry, yeah.
But the definite and the antagonist, like the bad guy, the villain, shouldn't really reveal themselves right until the end of the film. And I think we kind of done that with the new script, is we don't know quite who the bad guy is until, it's like Scooby-Doo when the mask is taken off. And
that's definitely there.
Them, all along. So yeah, I think we've struggled a little bit production-wise with bloody COVID to get this thing moving forward. But looking at the way the world's going right now, is 2022, do you think, a year where karma can actually be realized?
That's a good question. I think so. I mean, like, this has been an ongoing project for many years, but the average time to make a movie is 7 years, and the last 2 years of the films have been being made, but certainly with something like this and the kind of zone we're in as an independent movie, I think as we both know, impossible to have made it during COVID, but it feels like we're coming out of that. And yeah, I think this year potentially is the year for it. I certainly hope so, but I feel it's a realistic expectation now. So what about yourself?
I think we're coming out of it. I really do. I mean, we have this new Omicron strain, which everyone seems to be getting, and it's not really affecting anybody. My mum had it recently and had no.
Yeah, all my family just had it again.
Had no symptoms at all. So it seems like, it's touch wood, unless there's any other, other strains out there about to come into the mainstream. I think this could be the year for karma. I think it could be the year for dark karma to actually materialize and happen. And I think it's probably going to be worth the wait.
Yes, I'd agree with that.
These things, I mean, I've worked with people in video production, and they're always asking me, films, like, why does this take so long? Why is this industry so slow? And sometimes, I could have written something 10 years ago, but it's never been ready until I've got that one spark of an idea, which means it's now ready, and then it gets published, or it gets shot or whatever. So everything happens in good time, I think.
You know what? I mean, the thing is, right, you can make movies fast now, as we know. I mean, Netflix has the production line of movies. I don't know if you've tried to watch any of the kind of packaged movies that now seem to be coming out that clearly, I don't know whether it's a 6 or 12-month timeline, write it, get the cast, produce, get out. But there's no substance in them, The actors are okay. They're not bad actors. But, with Som, my girlfriend, we've been watching, about a year, maybe 2 years ago now, I got her to watch Jaws, because she was always like, I don't want to watch old movies. And we watched Jaws together. And she was like blown away with how freaking cool that movie was. And since then, we're always watching older movies, and you try and watch a new movie, you can churn movies out fast, but you just don't get the depth within the story and the characters. And yeah, it's a different kind of product, right? When it's not always, of course, some stuff's been done fast, but I think, kind of generally, things that are made fast are really not, it just doesn't have the depth.
But when you look into these like really famous franchises, like in the 1980s, 70s, 80s, Jaws is a good example because it was a book, and then it slowly, it sold, it got optioned, it got wrote, and then it slowly got picked up. And the Harrison Ford Indiana Jones thing, again, that was just an idea that I think was it Spielberg or Lucas had, like an old pulp character that and he wrote out a draft script, and then 5-6 years later they looked at it again and thought, nah. Then a couple of years later, and then finally it came into fruition. And I think a lot of these really successful projects are a long time in the making.
Yeah, I think so.
And a lot, as you say, I watch a lot of the Netflix stuff, and I was interested to see, the one thing that impressed me recently was Squid Games, and that had been in pre-production for like years and years.
I haven't watched it, and actually we only didn't watch it because we had a trouble with trying to do the subtitles between the two of us. But I did read his story, and I paraphrasing it slightly, but
rejection after rejection.
He wrote it. I mean, it was one of these kind of, tried to get it produced for years, rejection after rejection, lost everything, literally on the street, and then it becomes the biggest thing on Netflix ever. I mean, yeah, it's one of those kind of stories you can't make up. I must watch it, actually. I mean, I've not heard anyone say anything bad about it. All I hear is good stuff about it. So
yeah, well, you would need a few spare hours because it's totally gripping.
Really?
Yeah, it's one of those things you have to binge, and you're not gonna rest until you see the conclusion. And it's beautifully written, perfectly written. I think
we will have to do it.
I think the Koreans are doing such wonderful work at the moment. They have the whole kind of Hollywood formula worked out as if it's a mathematical equation. They know exactly what needs to happen when to keep an audience entertained and interested. But they add a kind of human, social element to it that Hollywood don't seem capable of doing with all their kind of, hero worshipping of celebrity, beautiful people.
Interesting.
But they take the whole kind of design of a film and make it relevant to, everyday people. So yeah, I think the Koreans have done a fantastic job. Train to Busan, man, what a movie. But yeah, I've seen a lot of the stuff that's been put out quickly on Netflix.
I find it hard. I can't really watch it. I get like 20 minutes in and I find it very difficult to watch, It's I'd rather watch, like the film you sent me the other week, a kind of low budget independent movie that maybe isn't as well crafted, but you can just feel the personal effort within the production.
Yeah, heart was in it.
Yeah.
But that's the thing with a lot of these films, like the production quality is top notch.
That's the thing.
Camera work, beautiful cinematography. It's great editing. It's slick. It looks beautiful. It sounds nice. The soundtrack's good. But the story, the writing is just flat. And the acting is often flat as well. So, you need to find a balance. I would rather have less production.
Somewhat ironically, I mean, watching bad acting within bad production is much easier than watching bad acting with tip-top production, right? It just, because it just doesn't go together. It feels really kind of grainy when if you're watching a kind of cheap ass film that someone's done for $100 and the acting's not great, well, it kind of works. But when someone's got a $2 million budget and it's all spent on, sets and effects and production quality with then not great actors, it's that stuff is harder to watch. I think it's
Yeah, maybe it's a good actor and they're just dialing it in, you know, and they're not that they haven't read the script, you know, or they haven't read their parts only. They haven't read the full thing. They're not invested in the project. So yeah, those cheap and nasty films with a you know, a small budget and a hungry cast and crew. As long as the intention's there and you have you know, a good team working, often it's more entertaining. You can learn a lot more from bad movies as well. I've sent you some bad movies recently.
I won't name any, but yeah, you have.
Yeah,
but they're all good. Yeah, they might be bad, but they're all good in their own right. And yeah, it's
you learn so much from them. It's like,
yeah. On that note, I mean, interesting. Where do you see, when you look at, say, Dark Karma, and then you look at the scene here, where do you see it fitting? Do you see it as a film that would be recognized as, hey, this is a Thailand movie? It's something, you know, that represents what can be done in Thailand, not just from a production point of view, but from a movie packaging point of view? Or do you see it as something that, hey, we happen to be in Thailand, but this is something that, you know, people in the UK want to watch, people in, you know, other parts of the world want to watch it? Never asked you that, but where do you see it as a product like that?
well, we're not, you know, fly-by-night producers, writers, directors. Between us, I said the core team. I've lived here 20 years and produced media content for most of that time. Richie's been here 20 years, same amount of time. Hollywood director, sorry, Hollywood camera operator, but independent director. Very, very technically skilled, can make a picture look beautiful with a very limited resource. And yourself being in here, as you say, since Australia 2014. So between the core team of three, there's like over 50 years of experience, 60 years of experience living in Thailand and writing content here. So this is very much a expats in Thailand, but almost, you know, like residents. We've been here so long, so we're seeing Thailand through the eye of an expat, but also through the eye of a local. We know we instinctively we can't be culturally insensitive to our hosts here. We are going to make the most, you know, it's going to be a high production for the budget. It's going to be as high production value as we can possibly make it. There won't be any shortcuts. There won't be too many shortcuts, at least. But yeah, it will be a picture that I hope will be the first really successful crime film set in Southeast Asia written by a foreigner. I can't think of any that have done particularly well, for me personally.
Awesome answer, and totally agree with you. So yeah, I think yeah, and I think it can be. You're right. I don't think anything has. Only God Forgives. That's probably, but that's a Hollywood production that was filmed in Bangkok. You know, it was obviously a story that was centered around here, but it was, and it obviously used a production company locally. But yeah, apart from that, the other movies you mentioned, I've seen most of. But yeah, I agree with you. It's something that is born and bred and created here that has a footing elsewhere. I think has not been done, and kind of feels like time, really.
Yeah, and if you look at the, and it's not been done. I don't think it's really been done in Tokyo or Taipei, or, you know, any of these other major Asian cities has any expat film director, writer really nailed crime in that city. I don't know, but the homegrown stuff is certainly fantastic. A lot of the Japanese crime stuff, Korean crime stuff is awesome. A lot of the Thai cinema as well is really good. Domestic stuff. The horror here is fantastic. I really like horror's your safe bet. I mean, as we both know, horror's your guaranteed ROI. I mean, horror's a really interesting genre, and here, well, we both know obviously a couple of movies that have done well here, but it's, yeah. And
Dark Karma doesn't have a horror element, but I think it has the ability to hook in a proportion of that audience that are attracted to those sorts of movies with the kind of mystical element to it, different to a horror film, obviously, but I think locally we will get, you know, a proportion of that kind of horror audience that are so dedicated to supporting those kind of movies. So
yeah, it's supernatural thriller, isn't it, in a way, as well as a crime story, and it's also like a personal growth story as well for Tim. It's a kind of a character based story, so it works on a lot of different levels. But predominantly, it's like a heist crime movie. He's got to get this ball. He's got to get this ball, and he's got to save his ass. Otherwise, he's going to be murdered by JD. But would she murder him? I don't think she would she?
No. Well,
But
I don't know.
that.
I mean, honestly, she's my favorite character now in the whole thing. I mean, you know, she's become the way you guys rewrote her. Well, I say rewrote. She wasn't there before, right? Oh no, she was a different. We kind of changed it slightly. Yeah. But and of course the kind of Biling hope and the connection to I whenever I read that character, I think of Biling, and I can imagine her playing that character, and that for me feels, it almost centers around her now in many ways. Do you know what I mean? She feels central to the whole plot. So yeah,
we had Biling agree to do the part years and years ago, right? When
I mean, I mean, I met her at the AFM briefly, and I know she just wants to make a movie in Thailand, right? So, and I've spoken to her I've got her on WhatsApp, and yeah, it's like all of these things, right? I mean, I'm, just another person with a movie. I mean, I think the moment we get to the point of, hey, we're going to do it on this day, I would have no doubt, I think she would be in for that part. She's had the screenplay. I don't know whether she read it. I haven't spoke to her since. She's seen the deck. She loves the...
Dude, she said she read it. And she said...
okay.
Some artistic... Do you remember? She said she wanted some artistic input.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she wanted... we didn't follow her up on it.
Well, I was trying to get her on a call for ages, but I mean, again, this whole lockdown thing, right? So it was about a year ago. Yeah, it was about a year ago when speaking to her. So
she was quarantining or something, I remember, and she read the script and said she liked the character, but she would like to make some suggestions about certain points in the.
Yeah, that's right. Really, we never got to that next conversation, which we should push again, really, and have that conversation. But I mean, to your point, I just see her playing that role, and I think absolutely she will when it's ready to go. And everyone was so, at the point we were chatting to her was right when COVID was at its height in the US in terms of, everyone getting vaccinated, no one leaving. And having a conversation about bringing a Hollywood actor over for an independent movie, middle last year was just not a possible conversation to have, right?
And then we had, we had
Sizemore.
We had Sizemore. The Sizemore actually came to Bangkok for the screening, I think, of the trailer.
Yeah, I might need to get another drink before I tell this story. But yeah, that was.
We can actually break it. Let's hang on for Richie, so we can break in.
Is he coming in? Is he?
Well, he said it'd be 30 minutes, and that was.
Be cool if he just jumped in randomly. Are you going to cut this out now? You just said we can break. Som, honey, can I have another glass of wine? Do you want a glass, honey? Oh, you're right.
Hi, Som.
James says hello. Hello. She can't hear. And that character, of course, that was not. So originally, we kind of earmarked him for this kind of Russian character, which didn't probably make sense, to be honest. And of course, he came down and sat with the director at the time over breakfast and was like, I could see it coming. He was like, "Hey, man, I want to be the lead. I'll take this film to the blah blah." And he was, "I want to be the lead." But since you guys have kind of got in and rewritten, and we've worked on the new kind of script, the part now, Troy, right, is just him. I mean, it, you know, you read that part, and I don't know whether he didn't answer. I don't know whether he read the new script. He's certainly read the old one, but that part is just kind of written around him, I would say.
It was written for him. I remember the first development meeting I had with Richie in PJ O'Brien's in Prakanong, an Irish pub. The first thing Richie said to me is, I want to make this film Sizemore's The Wrestler. The same way that Mickey Rourke reinvented his career with the Wrestler film, we saw, or Richie saw it first, the same kind of thing could be done with Sizemore and this character, Troy, Trauma Scott, who is, you know, an old 50s, I guess, mid-50s, ex-military, Afghanistan, army veteran, with some skeletons in the closet and some, you know, some addiction issues that are being resolved, some post-traumatic stress. Bundled on top of that, a bunch of new conflicts that arise in his life. He wants to get his hands on the bowl as well. His son's in hospital. He's had a car accident. You know, it's a deep, dark psychological pit that Sizemore character is, and he decides to help Tim, who he sees as a younger version of himself. And it's like the wounded carrying the wounded, isn't it? It's which is like an army metaphor as well. So yeah, we very much rewrote that, or we created that part with Sizemore in mind.
Yeah.
I mean, it needs that. It needs that American kind of gritty.
Well, it's the fact you wrote it like that as well. When you read the script, it's great because you read it, you know, visually in your head. You kind of see him playing it. I remember the scene in the boxing ring and stuff. But I mean, he's such a great actor. Like, he's a very natural actor. Everything he does there's no force in anything he does. He's just so natural as an actor. So yeah, I do hope he still plays that part. I think it's, you know, it's so fitting, obviously, because you guys wrote it for him, but I think he would really enjoy it as well, a lot more than the kind of, you know, the older version 5 or whatever it was that he would have read. And yeah, I think this part, when he reads it, if he hasn't already, he will absolutely love. I think it's so suits kind of natural acting ability, you know, who he is. It's just, he's not a forced actor anyway. He just is himself when he acts. But this part particularly, I think he would absolutely love playing it. I mean, it's just so natural to him.
Yeah, he's definitely a stand-up guy, and someone who brings just that wealth of experience, acting experience, to the table as well. When he came to Bangkok in person, did he have this kind of Hollywood charisma to him? Did he seem naturally kind of charismatic in person?
It's hard to answer because I'm not someone who's had a huge amount of experience with Hollywood, obviously, and that was certainly the first experience I'd had with Hollywood. But I suppose two answers to that question. I mean, from a charisma point of view, he absolutely held the audience, you know, whether it was us at breakfast or whether it was the people in the kind of small cinema that we did the screening in. I mean, you know, charismatically, he absolutely kind of held the audience at all points and the crowd. And yeah, I don't have anything to compare it to because I'm not a big Hollywood kind of agent or anything. But the other thing was, you know, in terms of his kind of Hollywood disruption of coming here, I mean, that was also relatively spectacular in the fact that, you know, I think he landed at 2 a.m. Actually, he flew via Hong Kong, so everything was organized. There was some issue, I can't remember what. He missed the flight. So he was a day late, and he was massively apologetic for, I think he misunderstood the date on the flight. My mistake, because I realized, man, do not always work through an agent. you know, whereas I was dealing direct. So there was no one there to say, hey, bang, here's the time. So we had that issue. We shifted everything, no problem. He arrived at 2 a.m. I got out there and I'm waiting, and Kate was with me. She was kind of on the phone with, suddenly the phone rings, and she's like, her face just drops. And I'm like, what's wrong? She's like, he can't come in. I'm like, so he's now in immigration, he's customs, he's coming through. What do you mean? So there's a page missing in his passport. What do you mean there's a page missing in his passport? I still, to this day, I mean, I don't know whether there was a page missing actually. And when he came through, he showed me his passport.
It wasn't the photo.
It wasn't the photo page, but I don't know what happened. All I know is, you know, it cost quite a bit of money to sort out the issue, and we're all done and dusted now. But just what, you know, bringing someone in through the VIP lane who's got, because we did the whole chauffeur thing, which you can do. It's not expensive. You can kind of get an escort into town, but maybe that was a mistake on my part, because it meant, you know, lights were shining on him as he came through, and people were looking for whatever they could find, and, you know, money was needed. And yeah, it was quite an experience for him, probably more than me, because I don't think he'd ever been to Thailand before. So he kind of came in after a massive long flight, the LA flight, LA, Hong Kong. I think he did 3 legs, but anyway, you know, long flight. And then he gets here, can't get in. And then I'm at the cash machine sorting out problems. And he's finally here. So charismatic, yes, brilliant with the audience. Hollywood drama, brought with him without a doubt. Certainly a memorable few days, I have to say.
Well, good on him for actually doing it. I mean,
yes.
Yeah, coming over for an independent film in Bangkok for a screening of a trailer fundraising event. So, yeah, cool. I mean, you must have had good persuasive tactics to get him actually to agree to do it, and that's good in and of itself. So,
well, you know what he said? I always remember this, because obviously, you know, part of the persuasive tactics was a business class seat, and he said, "Oh, can I bring my girlfriend with me?" And I said, "Yeah, no problem. You can both go economy." And he went, "Don't worry, I'll come on my own." Because yeah, it was quite a cost sorting it out. So, but yeah, it was, mate, he was a good guy, and it was fun, and you know, we still have all the kind of media trail from it, and he was great with the Thai media. You know, he really was. He was very amusing with, and they really loved him. A lot of the young, there was like 2 or 3 journalists who came in. I can't remember. They were running like kind of online movie magazines and shit. So, but they really loved him, because it was, for them, it was something different. You know, these guys don't normally get in front of people who've been A-listers. Yeah, because I think obviously when things like, you know, Only God Forgives, and what's his name? Forgotten his name.
Roslin.
Sorry?
Roslin.
Yeah. What's his name? No, who's the actor? Who's the actor? Ryan Gosling, yeah. You know, when Ryan Gosling was down, I mean, these, you know, a lot of these kids who are running, there's no way they'd have got airtime, you know. He would have just been in front of maybe the Bangkok Post and stuff. So, you know, it was great, because Sizemore was kind of very accessible, understandably, and was really giving with the press. And these kids got to kind of, and they were, I say kids, I mean, they were like 19, 20. There was 2 or 3 different media outlets that came in and interviewed him and got the stuff they needed, and wrote really cool little kind of blogs and articles about the experience. So yeah, I think that was useful, you know.
Yeah, without doubt. It's all about creating a kind of a bit of a buzz, I guess, is the is correct term. But that would have been in 2018, I think, or 2017.
17, I think.
Happened. Yeah.
Jeez, man, can't have been 5 years ago. Wow, yeah, probably was.
Yeah, 2017. I remember having an invite, but I was up in Minburi and not being able to get down for that. But then we shortly met afterwards through Kate, who was with you, helping you handle Tom Sizemore, who was an actress in a film I'd produced called Crazy Medicine with Matt Carroll, and also your trailer for Dark Karma. So she put us together, and that's when the we decided to work on a rewrite again, which would have been the third, I guess. Yeah, the third kind of version. And then we had the fourth. So there's been like 4 major rewrites on this film.
Of which there are about 7 before that. So yeah.
Yeah, in total there's 14. But
okay,
like major
yeah.
rewrites. And it's gotten better each time. I don't think we're killing it as we rewrite it. But it's a great concept. It's really. Do you believe in karma yourself, Matthew? Are you a
That's a
believer
good
in
question.
karma? Do you believe in free will? Do you believe that our actions come back to haunt us in this life? Forget about next life. Don't worry about like previous karma, shit like that.
Man, that's a really hard question to answer. But is that Richie coming in? No.
He says, I'm just getting home now.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to ask him about free will when he gets here.
So
he goes on about that.
Man, do I believe in? So do I believe in karma? I do believe in karma, but I don't believe it in, you know, in this kind of simplistic, hey, you know, it's not about, hey, you do good, good comes back. I think more, you know, I think if you're, what you do and how you behave tends to attract the necessary conditions for life in terms of situations and people that relate to that behavior. I know it sounds kind of, I mean, use kind of odd wording, but yeah, you act like a criminal, you're around criminals. Do you know what I mean? You act like a, so I think maybe that is karma. I don't know, but I don't think it's like, hey, I do this, I get this back. I think it's just more, you tend to attract the conditions. You tend to be surrounded with the conditions of how you behave anyway. So if that is what I believe, and if you would call that karma, then yes, I believe in karma. What was the other question?
I think that's precisely what the Buddha meant when he talked about karma in the Dhammapada, in the early transcriptions of his mutterings, which is like when they wrote down the stuff that he said through generations. He talked about the way you behave will, dictate or affect your life. You know, if I throw eggs at the window of my neighbor and she's the landlady of the house I'm living in next door, she probably won't renew my rental contract. You know, so this type of karma is easy to understand, right? How you behave reflects how life is. You know, if you're a good person, if you're ethical, if you're moral, then you will probably have, all things being well, a comfortable life. But then there's the concept of karma being generational, which I have a problem with.
You mean You mean as in past, as in the Buddhist concept of rebirth? Is what you mean?
But it's not Buddhist concept. That's the thing. It's actually Hindi and Brahmin animists. Like the Buddha actually disagreed, from my understanding, with a lot of that, and he was like, "You are your thoughts. What you do will shape the world in this lifetime." A lot of the other reincarnation, karma cut stuff came from before, and it was added on later.
Yeah, I mean, the Buddhists, I know a bit about it, but I also, and like you say, I struggle with it. And I think maybe you're not meant to think about it too much, even if it's kind of, what's the point, trying to think about past and future lives. But I think, you know, when you look at the Buddha's teachings, and then it becomes about the karma that you create, whatever that would be, whether it's negative, positive, neutral, through this life, can determine, you know, what happens when you're reborn. And I think when you start trying to even, for me, it just doesn't matter. So, you know,
subscribe to that at all. But I think the concept in Dark Karma, the movie, is this guy acted like a turd. He acted like a shit. And then he had a string of bad luck, which is because of the way he acted. But he reversed that karma by actually changing who he was as a character development, and then his life became more manageable, which I think we can all relate to.
Yes, 100%. I love your description of it then, and that was always the essence of the character. I don't think that's ever changed since the beginning. That's always been the arc. You know, he starts off about, you know, money can solve things, and he realizes solving things isn't about money. In a funny, you know, it's not there's that kind of element to his learning. And that also comes out in there. Hey, at the beginning, he's just all about his understanding of kind of Western culture, and I use that very broadly. I mean, you know, he's a very capitalist kind of driven guy in a job, and by the end of it, you know, he's all about understanding the guy who lives on the canal, who has way more steadiness, stature, spiritual balance, and a beautiful view on life, you know. And I think that becomes his understanding. Doesn't sort his debt out, but the debt he sorts out is a debt of very different sorts, you know.
You're beyond lost at that point. I mean, you're and then you've got to you have to look, you know, you have to rediscover the world and find a new lens to look at the world through. And he clumsily finds it. And then, I mean, is that the real lens? I mean, is there an objective lens and an objective point of view out there? Is there I mean, it's a big question mark. It's something that I think that also is a bit of a theme in here I mean, each one of our characters is also seeing, you know, they have a very different world. The lens
they each have their own little ego death.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, it's brutal, actually. I mean, it's really I want the story. Is it brutal enough is the question. I think that we could revisit it, and if we're going to need to kind of to cow to the, I think we need to bend a knee a little bit here and there for the landscape that exists now, that we really, I don't think there's any point for us to push back too hard against it. I think that there's even another level of humility in there that we will.
I agree, and if we lean down on budget as well, it just means stronger.
Yeah.
So we make these we make it more intense.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're all of us individually are going to be feeling the arc of the story, the full brunt of the arc of the story, and that's what the story is about, really. It's about you know, surviving with a big heart, and kind of, you know, realizing how, yeah, I mean, you know, at least finding what, you know, before it's too late to find some sort of objective clarity and to see existence through a lens that's arguably the closest thing you're going to get to objective reality. It's something I struggle with it personally all the time.
Me too. I mean, it's a classic story, isn't it? Finding not what you want, but what you need.
Yeah, that is the key point, I think. Well, interestingly, as just listening, I mean, the word karma is in there, and that will stay. But it is what you just said, though, James. It's not. It's more about, you know, it's about understanding the needs rather than the wants. Do you know what I mean? Which, for me, was always this kind of east-west balance, which I think is quite broad now, because I don't think it's so extreme as, it was always like that. But it's more, hey, he ends up in the kind of canals of Bangkok, you know, with or in the, you know, in the areas of Bangkok with the people that teach him who he should be, you know.
I mean, to keep that as a through line, I mean, it's just so humbling, you know, and we put all of our characters through this kind of humility where, I mean, you really don't have any control, you know. I mean, you really don't. I mean, you don't get away with anything ever. I mean, the best thing you could do is kind of give up, let go, and then hopefully, you know, you become part of the flow of the I don't know. It's almost like there is a high, like karma itself is a higher power. You know.
Well, here's an interesting question for you then. this is not really about the script, but I just listen to you talk. But so do you think can you believe in a lack of free will and also believe in karma?
I would say very much so, because because then we're looking at it as
but if free will doesn't exist, is karma a reality, or is it a result of lack of free will?
I mean, that's the thing. I think that in just paying attention to it, I think there's a lot of that you could personally benefit a lot just by being more aware of it and paying attention to it. But what really can you do? I mean, at the end of the day, you and the free will. I mean, we could go down the rabbit hole. I mean, it's I think that we a little bit do in the script with, our quote unquote the trademark Neuralink.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we call it whatever we want in the film, but I mean, if you're able, fuck, man, it brings up some really big questions. I don't know. I mean, they're flashing in my mind. I don't know if you guys are going to the same place, but okay, if the illusion of free will is an illusion, and I mean, really, since the Big Bang, we're part of these objects in motion that tend to stay in motion, and we're this great entropy, which leads to the big freeze at the end. It's very bleak, but there are questions. I mean, you can noodle around with science and neurology about the behavior of the mind and decisions. When you think that you're making a fresh decision, but you're really not. I mean, the fMRI will show that before that it became what you would think to be a creative, conscious decision, your brain's you're already there. It's we're bullshitting ourselves. It's kind of romantic and cute and nice to think that there is such a thing as free will, but when you look at it, when you put it under the microscope, it's not there. It's totally not there.
I completely agree with you. It's very interesting. And my question, I think maybe I asked it to myself, I don't know, but it's my understanding of how I think of karma is so based on the notion of free will, I realize.
I know, you're right.
So I'm like, so for me, I have a incongruence in that thinking, because I don't believe in free will, and I do believe in karma, but somewhere in the middle is a problem, because for me, karma is dependent on the notion of free will. So if you don't, believe in free will, it's like, well, karma is a result of something you had no control over. Therefore, it's not your own karma.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Do you know what I mean? You know where I'm kind of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, karma is quote unquote action. So it could be positive or negative results from that. So if you have positive action, there are some little like there's some little switches inside of free will. There's freedom of choice, little question marks, and we can get into Dan Dennert, the philosopher, and Sam Harris. I mean,
I know. I mean, we chatted about Sam Harris, I think.
Yeah.
But I also think when you say free will, people think, hey, of course, I just poured my wine. That was my choice, right?
Yeah.
But free will is such a difficult subject, because when people talk about lack of free will, interestingly, Rickard Gervais, and if you listen to him and Sam Harris chat,
absolutely,
they both they both do not believe in free will, and for me, it's so what's the word I'm looking for? It's refreshing to hear a comedian talk about it rather than a philosopher, because when a philosopher talks about it, you kind of expect that kind of shit. But a fucking everyday comedian who's an actor and a fucking producer and when he talks about it, I'm like, then I'm listening, because this is a guy who's just living his life and doing shit and looking after animals, and he's totally like, there is no free will. He don't even talk about it philosophically. He's like, fuck, it's obvious, So
totally
and
obvious.
I kind of get it more when I think, but it's
a I think a very important and interesting sidebar for us to talk about it, because I think that there's something really powerful and profound if we can honor what we what we tend to think is the quote unquote the truth about it, and let that shine. It won't necessarily be easy. I think it's there already, right? But if we could touch on it a little more. I don't know how sophisticated. I mean, to be honest, how sophisticated are Troy and Tim to get into that? I think it's something that
it's implied, isn't it?
I think
audience picks up that narrative.
Our meditator guru guy, that I forget what the guy who runs the gym, who plays that part. Sorry,
Prasad or Prasad.
Oh, Prasad.
Yeah, it would be in his realm. Him or JD could be hinting.
Yeah, I think they could have a banter about it. They could even talk about it while they're doing their little meditation. I think it's worthwhile for that.
Look at my dog, man. He's so beautiful.
Oh, hi, buddy.
Hey, you all right? Come and say hello.
What a beautiful buddy. Hey. Wow.
He's got an ounce of free will in him.
Anyway, sorry about that. Didn't mean to. He's just come over and said hello. So.
But you were talking about Ricky and Sam. They have Absolutely Mental, right?
I listened to.
I've listened to it a couple times.
Yeah, I listened to the whole thing. I mean, it's just. It made me laugh. It made me cry. It made me interested. That does that. Yeah. When you find something, and I love their friendship. For me, is just great because they're so different. Totally. And some fascinating bits in it. When Sam Harris alludes to the fact that clearly through his meditation he questions his atheism, not as a religious questioning, but as in an agnostic questioning because of psychedelics and because of meditation. And Ricky Gervais has no fucking idea about that shit. And the way when he says it, Ricky Gervais is just like pulls him up straight, because Ricky Gervais is like your mate down the pub who's atheist. Yeah. But the fact he talks about not believing in free will fascinated me.
Yeah, for sure.
Because that surprised me, because I would have said if I'd have bet on it, he'd be a guy who absolutely banks on free will, So
with Ricky, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So that really interested me, and I realized there's a level to his personality that is not what I understood, So yeah.
Well, I just think it's mad that I'm a huge fan of both of those guys. I've been following them closely for decades, and then they become mates.
Yeah,
it's like
it's because of the Four Horsemen and because of the whole it's because of all of that whole thing. I think is what connected them really, the atheist element, and Richard Dawkins, who is friends with Ricky Gervais as well. So
that's just what a treat, what a nice treat, very unexpected. So one thing is that that's interesting about the free will thing is that Sam says in one of his podcasts, he says we you can know that as the part of objective reality is that free will is an illusion, but he said, but how can you can't tell your kids that, right? Because when you're parenting a toddler or even a teenager, you can't to tell them free will is an illusion. I mean, it can't be because it's something that you have, which makes me want to dig a little deeper into that. Like why can, I mean, we can know that free will is an illusion, but it's not a very healthy thing to know until you're in your mid-20s, when until your frontal cortex is solidified, really. And then it becomes a healthy thing to become aware of, but it's not functional as a parent. I mean, for your kids, I mean, imagine that's your kid's answer when you're trying to get them to do X, Y, Z, and you get them to follow rules, etc. I mean, I think that's where it's worth like poking on that one with Sam. Like, wait a second, why is free will an illusion? But it's not when you're a parent, so you can use your control. So you're actually exercising what control you have or you think you have over your kids' reality. So I think that this is a very healthy, functional issue that we could kind of poke at in this film, and with karma in a nutshell. Is there a loophole with free will where it's Well, because it works in your favor, you know, when if you're manipulating and controlling another person, I mean, it gets kind of complicated, right? I mean, I think that it's probably a conversation we could have, and probably we need to be Googling some shit at the same time and drink a bottle of bourbon.
I've had 8 beers and a bottle of wine, by the way.
I'm on my first bourbon
but
day.
I just realized as you chat that there's a really, again, probably because of the Ricky Gervais and Sam Harris thing, that there's a really interesting trend that the people who tend to believe in the lack of free will tend to be not religious, and the people who are absolutely convinced of a control of are religious. But there's a somewhat kind of paradox in there that often religious people will put everything down to God if they didn't feel that it was something they could control, which is really
it's collapsing.
It's kind of like a contradictory situation. I never really thought about it, but often the people are like, I have absolute free will. Usually, and I'm just purely talking about people I listen to on the internet. Like, I forget his name, right wing, kind of like him, Ben Shapiro. Very, not my kind of guy to hang around with, but I appreciate what he says.
Me too.
But he talks about free will of having absolute.
That's the real thing.
Yeah, and he's massively religious.
Yeah.
So he would also put many things down to the will of God. So I'm like, where is the divisioning line then?
Yeah. So if it's God's plan, well, that would be, to say, well, it's God's plan. It's like,
that would be there's no free will then, wouldn't it?
Yeah. It's like
it's a contradiction almost.
Yeah. I mean, when innocent children are dying of cancer and XYZ and there's a lot of suffering that exists in the world where they say, oh, it's just God's plan. Well, but also, so it's God's plan, but you also believe in free will. You can't really have it all. You can't have
exactly. So, and interestingly, we have dark karma, which is not about religion, but there is the karma thing does connect to Buddhism, and we have this kind of free will versus religion thing. I don't know how we explore that. Like, I agree with what you said at the beginning, Richie. This is a great conversation, but you try and go anywhere near these subjects in the movie, you fuck the movie up probably, and just
I think so. I think
you might as well go and do a documentary that links to the movie and go and, do you know what I mean? Because I think you can hint at some of these subjects, but you might just lose the plot.
Totally.
The pun. But
I think we flirt with them and let it be part of a through line. I think that where it gives it I mean, there's a lot more like it's a very tangible substance. There's kind of an underlying philosophy that, and there's like, I don't know, it feels like there's a body of knowledge that we, that's underneath this story, right? Where we, there's kind of a knowing that exists in there that we've helped to put it into the story. So we can flirt with these without it being it's not the plot. I don't know how to package these philosophical concepts into a storyline.
I think it's all kind of subtle. I think as human beings, we need a shining light. We need something to be aiming towards, whether that's like God, or whether that's a Gucci handbag, or whether that's the next promotion, or whether that's listening to the next rock and roll record or whatever. We need something to follow. And I think the interesting thing about dark karma is they all have their pre-existing gods. For JD, it's kind of fashion and money, and for Tim, it's kind of the same thing. And for the Sultan character, it's revenge, but it's all replaced by one object, and that object is the bowl and what that represents. So that bowl becomes their religion. It's one thing they're all aiming towards. And as I say, as human beings, I mean, the pyramids wouldn't have been built if people didn't believe that, they toiled every fucking day of their life and they'd be reborn into the Western lands or whatever. As human beings, we're built. Aristotle, this innate wisdom, this innate need to follow. which is what, and even like following the idea of no free will is in its way following a belief system.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a different belief system to that of free will or God. So for the purpose of this story, this bowl is their fucking light. That's the thing they're all aiming towards. That is the answer.
Yes.
And that's what we have in life. You know, we have this fucking shining light and it changes.
Well, yeah. And at the end of the day, there is, I mean, we're creating a new kind of a superpower, like a mystic reality where the potential, like there's a potential that can be unlocked, you know, through vibration, through, you know, through meditation, through that, you know, there are bigger thresholds that humanity can, you know, that we will evolve into these bigger powers, you know, which is cool. It's a mythology that we put into the story here. That if you, I mean, you know, as a staunch atheist that's like very anti woo woo, I think you can look back at this and an atheist could, I mean, I think that we're making a good argument that these could be laws of physics. It's very potentially, it's very realistic. You know, it's not, there's no bullshit. You know, it's not about belief or higher powers necessarily. It's human. It's these powers that exist in that we're unlocking. A little bit of technology helps to move, but it existed without technology as well. Anyway, yeah. It's there, man. We hit a lot. I think we hit a lot of sweet spots on the script, man. It's when we start talking about it, I get really excited about it again.
Yeah, you know what? The great thing is with this stuff, which is fucking, you just can't just you know, you can't just suddenly kind of get these themes across within a movie without, you know, very difficult. However,
yeah,
you could really easily, even at the point of production, go, hey, we're really putting these themes in, and you might have a 2 or 3 dream sequence element with one character, presumably Tim. And you know, you've seen Sexy Beast, right?
Yeah.
You've seen Sexy Beast. There's a great, when Ray Winston is having massive anxiety and he's having these dreams about there's a woman on a horse wearing a rabbit mask, right? I don't even know what it means, but my point is,
yeah,
even if this stuff we wanted to drip in a way cleverly, you go, you know what? Someone has anxiety around this subject of free will, and there's some kind of dream sequence we create that pushes the movie, but people who don't understand it doesn't matter. As you were talking, I was remembering Sexy Beast and the weird dreams that Ray Winston had, and yeah, it was anxiety dreams. I think I'm sure it was a rabbit on a horse, or yeah. Anyway, I
was going to say that. I mean, in my early days of even like approaching the concept that, you know, free will could possibly be an illusion at all. Yeah, I remember that I was talking to a really intelligent friend of mine who really opened my eyes about the question. You know, he said whether it's real or not, it's a very worthwhile exercise and a great debate. Pretend like it's bullshit. Like, why don't you just, you know, for the sake of conversation and just for the kind of the sport of a debate, like, why don't you just hold tight to the debate that free will is an illusion, that it does not exist. See what happens. And that was because I couldn't quite wrap my head around how it could possibly not exist. And then so I did it kind of it was a sporty debate. So that I started to just like spar with my friends. And this is something we could literally put this in the film where Tim could say, like, what do you mean free will is an illusion?
Oh, you have it like a scene where it's just a scene of literally a scene just to discuss free will based on whatever's going to happen next.
And it's kind of fun in a way. It's like,
okay,
free will is an illusion. It's like, wait, I can't wrap my head around that, you know? And then it's like, well, who cares if you could wrap your head around it? Like, pretend like it's a debate. It's a sparring match. Free will is an illusion. Free will is bullshit. You know, just go down that rabbit hole. And then and then just ask yourself that question repeatedly. Now, a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, who just lives a kilometer away from where I'm at now, he did 20 years ago. He said this to me 22 years ago. And since then, I started bringing it up occasionally with other friends when I had the opportunity. And I didn't know really. And this is kind of before Google, before we had the internet, but we couldn't Google anything. And then since then, that's how this whole, the question of free will, that was the growth and the path that it took, that the whole question and the argument or the philosophy, that's how it really came to existence in my life, which is funny because that's almost proof that free will is an illusion. I didn't of my own free will question free will.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I mean, boom, there, it's over. It's over already. So, but that could be, you could tell that story pretty quickly. And if you just plant that seed in the audience's head, now whether I don't know how deep they get into it by the time the movie's over. That's one thing. But if they get it, it's gonna fuck with them for the rest of their life. Just the concept of, hey, cool.
Maybe that's the goal.
Exactly. If I get one audience member to start, to just question it and then start to use it as a fun. It is a real fun sparring match if you want to start talking philosophy with somebody. To just hold on to it, even if you don't know. I mean, it's like you can't. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure if free will is an illusion or not, but I'm gonna go to that corner. I'm gonna hold.
Same
on.
Yeah.
But it turns out that it was the right hill to die on.
I think at the end of the film, Tim is reasonably happy. He's reasonably content. He's gone through the story arc cycle. My question is happiness simply chemicals being released in the brain? There's lots of talk now about neuroscience.
Happiness.
Does it come? Do we need to have the struggle?
I hate the word happiness because I think it's a fucking.
I think it's absolute bullshit.
I think purpose is massively important, but
absolutely,
which is not. It's purpose is constant, not emotive in the moment. So, the moment you go, I have this feeling now, you've fucked already. Purpose is something that is constantly going.
Meaning, you mean?
Meaning. I suppose there's loads of ways to describe it, but I think happiness is a state. Maybe, again, this could just be, happiness is a state. Purpose is a motion. It's a process, and you have purpose. I wouldn't go, I feel happy. I just get on with shit. So I think good,
I would go so far as to say happiness is absolute rubbish.
Yeah, I totally
not something worth striving for.
Totally fucking agree with you. Yeah.
I think that when I feel quote unquote happy, it almost freaks me out. I almost have
bad side.
Really bad side.
We're doing something wrong.
Yeah. Is that what the world has done to me?
No, I totally agree with you.
This would be nice, but this would be nice to put in the film as well. That's the conversation between Tim and Troy right there.
Yeah, that is fucking definitely.
Fuck happiness.
Yeah,
true nature.
I mean, honestly, that is what attracted me to Buddhism because the four noble truths of the first one is life is suffering. The first rule of fucking Buddhism is life is suffering. I mean, anyone who I was just like, great, fucking, I understand this shit. Of course it is.
Exactly.
Fucking, if you can't look at reality, you can't work your way out of it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And anyone who's going, life is happy, is basically hiding behind a cloak of bullshit.
They're so full of shit.
Yeah. This the kind of suffering element it's not the best. I don't think it's the best translation of the Pali word of. I can't remember what it is, but But for me, it makes sense. Fuck it. Life is suffering.
I had this thing because I was raised Buddhist, or no, sorry, I was raised Baptist. And my biggest fear was that someday you would cease to exist. You know, that was my like a huge fear.
Yeah, well, it would be, yeah, because they want you to talk about living forever after you die. So yeah, it's kind of
Jesus Christ, and you go to heaven, all this other kind of rubbish. And so my biggest fear was ceasing to exist. And then when discovering Buddhism, where that becomes the biggest goal.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That was, to me, I was just like, yeah, okay,
Fucking right. I had the same realization, mate. I was like, wow, this is regardless of whether it's true, I'm like, hey, this is a strategy to not exist.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, fuck, I'm in. I'm like, fucking sign me up. It's like, I don't need bells on next to, and then I realized, oh shit, it might take me 1,000 times.
Yeah. I'm getting a.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Maybe we pull the plug because
I'm getting the what do you call that? The hook.
I think we call that destiny.
Or lack of free will.